Well, welcome to another edition of Inclusion Talks. And it's great to have this podcast with us every single week, talking all things all ability sport. My name's Dan Lonigan, and it's great to have my co-host, Cindy McDougall, with me once again. It's her show. She drives the program. She organised the guests. We're also here, of course, for our sponsor, and great to have them on board, Aussie Home Loans. They deal with anyone in Australia. They've got clients in every state and capital. They do Zoom as well, and their areas of expertise, including first home buyers, equipment loans, car loans, personal loans, any sort of loans. Welcome, Cindy. Great to have you with us once again. And you've got a magnificent guest with us this week.
Yeah, it's great to be back, Dan. So we're getting some incredible sports minds on the program, and I'm really thrilled that today we welcome Liz Gosper, head coach of IST, longtime supporter and builder of inclusive sports opportunities. Liz's pedigree is impressive. A Virtus World Intellectual Disability Organisation head international coach, multiple world national medal winning coach, an incredible masters athlete herself, and a receiver of many accolades and awards for her incredible commitment to inclusion in sport. Today, we will learn more about her backstory, her future goals, some hopes and wishes for all athletes, and our inclusive sport plans and dreams going into the future. Hopefully, we'll also get to chat about her squad and their upcoming events. I've known Liz for about 10 years, Dan, starting with School Sports Nationals and then as part of the ASVIC Para Squad. And we've watched so many incredible young athletes go from truly grassroots to the highest of international glory and everything in between. So welcome, Liz.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having me, Cindy.
Thank you for being on. So can you tell us a little bit about how you began your journey in inclusive sport? I think it'd be a great place to start.
Okay, so I'm showing my age here, but back in the 1976, I finished school and I went straight into a phys ed, Bachelor of Education, and we had to specialise in those days. And I did, it was called phys ed for the handicapped, and I specialised in that area. And then I went on to do a fifth year at uni part-time because I was teaching special education. And we had to specialise again. I actually specialised in the area of deaf or hearing impaired, as we call it now. So that was my education. Then I went on to teaching in a mainstream school, which was a shock to me. I was in the northern suburbs, which at the time I'd never even visited. And I taught prep to 11. There was no year 12 at this school, PE, and I got one lesson off a week. So it was pretty tough in those days.
Not a lot of
one
time for
period
playing.
a week off. And I think in the first term, I lost 7 kilograms. So that was I'll never forget that experience. But it was a good experience. And, there was a lot of diversity at that school. But yeah, I just kept going. And I started having children in my early 20s. So it was sort of start, stop. Next thing, I ended up, because I'd done hearing impaired, I could sign English. That's what we learned in those days. Now it's Auslan primarily, but I got a job at my local school where my 2 daughters were attending, and I was the sign interpreter for a boy in the school. It was very sporty. Then anyway, over the years and the decades, sort of start, stop, had another child, and ended up really where it all began, this sports inclusion, was at Ashwood Special School that you'll know, one of the 83, I think, special schools in Victoria. And I went into that school.
How have you seen it grow and develop in that time, Liz, starting from those really, really early times of, I guess, where sport maybe wasn't such a priority for kids with a disability to now where there really is a great, incredible strength and push for, true inclusion for all children with a disability? What sort of growth have you seen? And I guess what's been the best thing that you've seen out of that?
Well, I think that when I started Ashwood School, we were doing the school sporting Victoria competitions, and my own children had gone through that system and had made state teams and so forth. And they were also competitive skiers and had a lot of opportunities to, ski for their country and so forth and swim for their state. And I wanted the kids at Ashwood School to have that same opportunity. And So I think it was 2010 I started there, and I asked the principal at the time if instead of being a phys ed teacher, could I be a fitness teacher? Because you'd see them return after they'd finished year 12, where they'd been doing in year 12 like 8 sport periods a week. Our school was really had a big focus on sport. But then when they left school, there was nothing. There was nothing to keep competing in. There was football and basketball, but SSB is about, as you know, track and field, cross country, and swimming. I wanted to keep that going. And I was also, an age group triathlete. So I put it to the principal, could I work as a triathlon coach, like a fitness coach? And she was like, okay. So I think that was the opportunity. But when we started, Ashwood School got really good quickly because the other schools, there were odd school doing it around the country. But as you know, like Ashwood started to dominate because we were actually training. And then we had to look at opportunities when they left school. So, but your question was, how has it changed? I think at the start, we only had Special Olympics to go to post-school, and which we started doing that. But then as things developed, I found that there's the Virtus pathway, and for example, in athletics, they could keep running and doing state championships if they joined a club. So there wasn't really a club, and we're talking here intellectual impairment. I'm not really talking about anything else because that's my specialty. And it's just, anyway, we joined a club and things developed and opportunities came our way slowly, but it has been an absolute explosion over the last 10 years. When we were begging and screaming for inclusion, now it's raining down on us, and which is a good thing.
Why do you think that's happened, Liz? Why do you think now clubs who might have been reticent to have intellectually disabled athletes join their club, probably for no other reason other than a lack of knowledge, now that, as you say, there's just so much interest?
Well, I think it's sort of a human right to be able to go and join a club, and there's so much press now about inclusion. I think that, coaches are told, realise that they have to be inclusive. Whereas before, years ago, you probably say, oh, no, that's not really, I was told by a coach early on, no, I don't want to take your cohort of athletes, and I had a lot, because I don't know anything about intellectual impairment and I don't know where to start. And I said to that person, well, that's fair enough, because inclusion is about being somewhere where it works. It's not, I'm going to force someone to do it. Mm. And he was honest, and I didn't really mind that. And then we went for the athletics part of it. Anthony De Castella, the brother of Rob De Castella.
Yeah, went to school with Anthony. Lovely bloke. Yeah.
Oh, well, we're involved with Anthony. So I went to Anthony and said, if I come along and I bring a couple of athletes, would you be willing to include? And he said, well, yes, you come with them, and I'm a runner, and you help me understand what to do. So, and still, I think that we started that in 2018. So 7 years later, I'm still running. Well, I've got a broken foot at the moment, but I'm still running with them. And Anthony's learned a lot from having our athletes there. And we actually probably half the competition now of Xavier Old Zavarian's Athletics Club. So it's, but I think you can't just drop people, like 30 kids with an intellectual impairment, at a local club and say, see you later, because that inclusion won't work. It's like anything, really. You're not going to drop 20 people who want to do ballet mainstream at a club if they've never done ballet before. That's not going to work either. You have to progress. And, we found the right people who want to include. In cycling, we have Preston Cycling Club, because the athletes have to belong to a club. IST is a business. I don't want to become a cycling club and an AS club and a swimming club. I mean, that's just too much and impossible. It's impossible. And it doesn't have to need to be like that.
That's very much about building those connections with the clubs to give the opportunity.
Yes. And I think Xavier, our parents are now running for the club, and our parents are on Old Zavarian committee.
Yes.
And it's become a cliche family, but it really is. It's
Build
And, the
opportunity.
running helps. I'm primarily for triathlon, but the running obviously helps in triathlon. So it's all interconnected and it just works really well. But it took time and we had to establish who wanted to include us because we're not just going to go anywhere. There has to be real inclusion that works.
This
On
is
that note, Liz,
I was just going to
sorry,
say, Cindy,
Dan.
this is Inclusion Talks with Cindy McDougall and Dan Lonigan. Our guest today, Liz Gosper, and we're here for Aussie Home Loans. We can deal with anyone in Australia. We've got clients in every state and capital, and they do Zoom, etc. All yours, Cindy.
So you left the schooling environment, Liz, to start your own squad. You mentioned IST, which is Inclusive Sport Training, and it's a specialised training group that focuses on giving athletes with a disability the best platform to grow and to build confidence and compete at the highest level. What inspired you to actually go out on your own and do that?
Well, the principal asked me when I said, can I be a triathlon coach at the school? And she said, yes. I thought I better be nice to her because then she said to me, could you please start up something on a Saturday? Because a lot of the pupils in the school, their siblings do Saturday sport and they need something. So can you start something? So I said, okay. And I just started off, I think 14 was the first thing. And we started some cycling at a velodrome and running around the Tan. And basically those days it was, walk run. And things just, I didn't really go out with a big plan. Things just evolved. So then we started, and then we thought, well, in 2013, I got 60 kids in the school to do a triathlon after a year of training as a triathlete. So we built up connections in the triathlon world, which I already was familiar with. So it wasn't really difficult for me because I knew a lot of people because I've been doing them for 25 years at that stage. So it's always about people, isn't it? And people that you can trust. And so then we did the triathlon, but because we were training in the 3 disciplines, the athletes got really good. Some got really good at running. They never knew they were runners. And I was ringing up the parents going, oh my God, do you realize that so-and-so is a really good runner? And they're going, no, I had no idea. And you could spot talent. And it wasn't just talent. They got really enthusiastic about doing it. And then swimming's probably quite hard because swimming's very technical. And if you hadn't learnt to swim and have those opportunities as a young person, at 3, 4, 5, when you learn to blow bubbles and get familiar with water, trying to teach someone to swim when they're 12 or 13 is a lot more difficult. It's just a longer process. So I use swimming. People donated fins to me. They donated, I think, all sorts of things for us to be able to do the program because this was before NDIS.
Yeah.
But once NDIS came in, our programs could expand because they could use that, they had money and they could do maybe being able to afford one thing a week. Now families were able to afford, 3 or 4 things a week. So the more they could do, the better they got. And then the opportunities came up to compete.
How severe, for want maybe of a better expression, are some of the athletes you deal with in regard to their disabilities? And being a coach and a coach with experience in this space, how do you have to change the way you coach them, Liz?
Well, I think I grew up in that space. So, from in the mid-70s, I was teaching in this space. So to me, it was just what I did and it was sort of a no-brainer for me. But it's really important to have the right coaches there. So in IST, I employed people with coaching credentials from Ashwood School, really. So they had, because I guess we're a mild intellectual disability, which is, if to go to Ashwood School, for example, your IQ and behaviour adaptive is between 50 and 70 IQ. And that's a mild intellectual disability. So that's really where the cohort came from. And then in sport, though, it is between 50 and 70, well, below 75. So you do a test to see if you are actually in that space. So, for example, if you go to the Paralympics for intellectual impairment, well, there's only 3 sports you can compete in at the Olympics, but they take that below 75 IQ behaviour adaptive. So if you're 76, you test, you can't go to the Paralympics. So that's the thing. But there's a lot of, the term they use is comorbidity, which is morbidity means sickness, which isn't a very nice term. But So I'd say of maybe 60, 70% of the IST athletes also have autism. And then over the years, it's developed from intellectual impairment 1 category, which is what I was talking about, the Paralympics. There's also now in the Virtus space, which not many people have heard about, except Cindy. Virtus is a competition, a worldwide competition for people with intellectual impairment, which is the highest level. So if you go, everyone's heard of Special Olympics, that's more participation level. You don't actually need to be classified. You just need a letter from your doctor to say you've got some type of disability. But Special Olympics isn't the Paralympics, but the Paralympics comes through the Virtus pathway. Anyway, a bit complicated, but Virtus has added II1, which is what I'm talking about, II2, which is for Down syndrome and comorbidity, and then recently II3, which is for what we call high functioning autism. So you've got an IQ above 75, but you've got an autism diagnosis. So now IST's developed, I've got a lot of students who have that II3 category, which is, you know, it's great. It's more inclusive and they can go on to represent Australia at Virtus competitions if they want to.
And the II3 is starting to expand as well. We've got Swimming Australia have come on board and they actually have a classification for that, which is called S19, which 3 of my children have followed through on that pathway through School Sports Victoria, and that's starting to expand nationally. And then hopefully the groundwork's being laid for that classification to be introduced into track and field and other I guess, sporting pathways. So it's really good to see that it's growing and that it's giving more children, you know, that to some people may look like they don't have a disability, but do have an extreme level of, I guess, understanding to be able to understand the technicalities of sport. So it is incredibly hard for them to engage in the way that a normal or neurotypical child would engage in sport. So by having that extra, definitely what I personally call the Down syndrome, but the II2 and the II3, it broadens that acceptability and I guess inclusion for more children with a disability to be able to engage in the benefits that the sport gives. So really, really great to see that that's growing, to be honest. It's something that I've personally been pretty passionate about, and I know Liz has too, to try and give those people that just don't have an opportunity to have the experience of maybe a higher level or you know, just to, I guess, be understood in sport, a chance to grow. So that's really great.
Do you
Yes,
think
it's amazing. 10 years ago, they didn't have that. So that's been a huge progression.
Do you think Liz will ever get to the stage where very high functioning sufferers of autism or people on the spectrum, even higher than what you've been talking about, will get an opportunity to perform at Special Olympics, that they will just be able to find a criteria for any person on the spectrum, no matter how minor, for want again of a better expression, not knowing the terms like you guys do, that they'll be able to compete at Special Olympics, no matter what their disability might be?
Special Olympics is more participation. So anyone can go there with a doctor's certificate. It's not a classification. You don't do an actual test. But the Paralympics, yes, they've got their sights on adding an II3 category, but as we know, it's very, you know, the Paralympics it's great. And I think most people think if you're a good para athlete, you're the best, you'll make it to the Paralympics. But it's not like that, because there's only 3 sports in the Paralympics for intellectual impairment. And then, for example, if you take track and field there's only 2 field events and there's only 2 running events for II1. And that's 400 metres and 1,500 metres. So it's inclusive. It sounds like it's inclusive, but unless you're a 400 metre and a 1,500 metre runner, and then when you even get to I'll just take the example of 1,500 metre women's, in IST, we've got the 2 best 1,500 metre runners in Australia. The IPC, International Paralympic Committee, time to go to the Paralympics is 5:15, 5 minutes 15. And any country with a 5:15 or under could take their athlete. But in Australia, at the Paralympics, we only take our medal chances. So Australia, for example, the 5:15 time, is the B qualifier has been reduced to a 4:49. And then they're only, so they make it's really hard. It's all based on money. So even though you might be the best of the best and you've qualified through IPC, you're still not guaranteed to go by any means, because there's only so many slots for Australia to send people. So it's all, it can become very, very frustrating. But if we look at the one level down of competition, which is Virtus, I think there's 14 different sports, and they have the global games, which is probably like the Paralympics of intellectual impairment. Every 4 years, they have Oceania games in between. Cindy's daughter's done that several times. And they have swimming, cycling and athletics. And then there's world championships in other sports. So there are opportunities, but the Paralympics is very limited.
Could you see, Liz, down the track, and Liz Gosper is our guest on our program today, Inclusion Talks, for our sponsor, Aussie Home Loans, who deal with anyone in Australia. They've got clients in every state and capital. They do Zoom as well, and they've got over 25 lenders on the panel. Could you see down the track that the Paralympics offering more sports for those obviously with autism and are on the spectrum, or do you think it'll always just be 3 or 4 disciplines in athletics, as you've just mentioned?
Oh, well, I mean, we'd like more. And then there's Robin Smith, who's the CEO of Sports Inclusion Australia, and she's also on the IPC, and she's always out there advocating for more change and more inclusion. So, but one thing that personally, my passion is triathlon first, and World Triathlon, which is the governing body and part of the IPC, they've just recently created a World Commission for Intellectual Impairment. And we'd love to so World Triathlon has para, but it doesn't have intellectual impairment. It only has 6 or 7 categories, I think, and they're all physical. So intellectual impairment is not included in para triathlon. However, we've got a new commission, it's been going for about 2 years now, to try and work towards this, which is amazing. And I'm the Oceania representative on that committee. And we've just had a breakthrough. So the World Triathlon Multisport Championships are being held in August in Townsville, Australia. And it's just been passed by the executive board that the II athletes will be recognised with medals at that competition. So it's still not part of World Triathlon, but it's the first step of recognition. And then if we can build that and we can show World Triathlon that our kids are able and won't get in the way and all these things that we've had to prove, then, we're stepping towards World Triathlon and hopefully Paratriathlon one day, and then hopefully Paralympics.
That's definitely something that I think is really important. It's been part of our journey over the time, Liz, is where you've seen them put in the kids and, especially through my involvement with Little Ass, you saw them include them, but they weren't actually regarded as the same level as able-bodied. So while they might offer them events, they didn't medal. So they were, again, going, well, how come the able-bodied kids are getting medals and we're getting a ribbon or we're getting a certificate? So that's incredible that they're actually going to be, albeit a little bit exhibition-wise, that they'll actually get recognised with medals and have that recognition of the effort and the time and the commitment that they're putting in to actually get to that level. That's huge.
Yeah, so they had to qualify in the mainstream. They had to qualify in mainstream ages over the last year. So we did all that, and we were just going to go and compete as mainstream athletes. Even though all the paras were there, we couldn't do the para part. So my point to World Triathlon was, we've already shown that we can compete in age groups. One girl came second in the Australian 20 to 24 championships, and she's got an intellectual impairment. And that's sort of really? Because I think they have a preconceived idea of what someone with an intellectual impairment is.
Exactly.
But ours have a hidden intellectual impairment because, as you mentioned before, that they don't look different.
No. So
people just don't even realise that they have an intellectual impairment until you maybe chat for a while and you realise that they might. So because they qualified mainstream, they were competing anyway. So all we're going to do is so for instance, say, you know, Susie comes 10th in the world, but she's the first person with an II, she'll get a first medal on the podium at the same time. So we can actually showcase to the world what these amazing athletes can do and not use people's preconceived ideas of what they can't do. So I'm really looking forward to showing the technical officials and, you know, everybody there, their prowess. It's a great way to, you know, just put everything on display.
A great way to teach the officials as well, I think. I think it's really important that there are a lot of preconceived notions, and sometimes it's getting the officials to understand that you know, these kids aren't a real struggle for them, and that, you know, that it is such a benefit to have them there in the overall scheme of things. And yeah, I think that will be awesome to see how that actually how that grows from that. And I guess you hate saying recognition, but how the recognition of that goes forward to help build it.
Exactly.
How frustrating has it been over the years, Liz, to get more recognition for people with intellectual disabilities to be able to perform their sport at the required level? You've been involved in it a long, long time now. It looks like you'll continue to do it for a long, long time. I mean, it just must be frustrating that there've been a lot of barriers that have been in the way for you.
I think that the newer sports like triathlon, it's much easier. You know, it's just a different scene. Over summer, there's a series called the 2x and we went and asked if we could have an II category in that race. We race alongside them and we get medals and we get the same recognition. And they just went, yes, 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 yes. Like that was easy. That hasn't been frustrating. I find that the newer sports, I find some of the older, more established sports, you've got the Lisa Waitman's saga at the moment about the marathon. I mean, I think some sports just aren't as inclusive.
Maybe a little bit jaded.
We've got, for example, I'll tell you, like at the Athletics Australia, if you go to the national competition, so you've gone through the state and you've got the right requirements to go to the nationals, if you, you know, you turn up to the 1,500 metres open race, and as I said, we've got the two best girls in Australia running, or with IPC qualifying times, but if there's not more than 3 people in the race, they won't even give them a medal. So that's just archaic, because if you did triathlon and you're racing 60 to 64 women and there might only be 2 people there, they wouldn't say, well, I'm sorry, you didn't bring a third friend along to do it. You can't have the medal. It just doesn't happen in other sports. It's very strange and it's very disappointing and it's very disheartening. So that's really frustrating, very frustrating. They don't do that in cycling. They just, you know, I see why some sports have these rules, and, you know, it's not the athlete's fault that they haven't got a couple more friends to run that event.
And there's actually been things at nationals, as Liz would be aware, where they've had 3 or 4 on the start list and 2 have pulled out. So the actual event starts with only 2 and it becomes a non-medaling event. So they've known at the start and they would have medals ready for it, but because they drop under that 3, it then becomes non-medaling, especially for kids with an intellectual disability. That can be incredibly disheartening and can make it, and it's the same for the parents, and because, you know, you do put in a lot of effort to take your kids and it is a lot of money, and you go in with a hope that you can give them some recognition of the effort that they've put in, and you know, all of the amazing strength and commitment, and then it's like, sorry, it's just your bad luck, there isn't 3 in the event.
And, you know, imagine if, you know, I was racing and I turned up and there were 5 people in the event and I knew that from the start list, and I've paid, as Cindy said, I've paid, you know, $200 to do the race. I've travelled there. I've done the race like everybody else. And then they go, well, sorry, Liz, you don't get the medal because, you know, Julianne and Sophie were sick that day. Even though I'd say, for example, won it. Like, it's how can you do that to anybody, let alone a kid with an intellectual impairment? And that is my major frustration. Yeah, I've had tears, we've had breakdowns, I mean, it's unfair. I think I'd cry if they did that to me. it's just unfair on the parents. The parents have had enough knockbacks in their life to be knocked back again. Like, you can't have a medal because there aren't 3 in it. It doesn't make any difference if there's 1, 2 or 3 in it. Like, it's just, so
You've qualified.
so Cindy and I would say that is the extremely frustrating, archaic rule that they have. So that's
It'd be
frustrating.
nice to be seen changed.
And I think that with other sports too, because I've got like so many, 90% of the triathletes in the country and the cyclists, that they come to me and say, what would work for your athletes? How can we make this inclusive? How can we make this a happy space? What do you need? And I can go to triathlon, well, we need, like, for example, in the National Triathlon Championships at Wollongong a couple of months ago, we had one II3 category. Well, that person got the medal. Like, they didn't say, like athletics, well, sorry, you didn't bring 2 friends along, you can't have it. That sort of thing is just ridiculous. And
it's not conducive to building inclusion.
No, people don't, I don't, and then athletics has that multi-class system where you might be racing in the 100 metres with one person with intellectual impairment, short stature, and so forth. Like, say you might have 6 different disabilities, and then there's a multi-class scoring table. So when the athletes first start doing it, like every mainstream race, if you cross the line first, you think you've come first, right? You're a kid, you've come first. But our athletes can be told you've crossed the line first, but you've actually come last.
Why?
Because they use a world ranking system. And I mean, I could explain it to you, but it's very disheartening. So it takes the kids and the parents a couple of years to get used to this. Because
they're big on not doing individual classification races because they don't believe there is enough uptake, I guess, of multi-class in Australia. So they say that there aren't enough to run a classification specific race, which to some extent they're probably right, but it's incredibly frustrating, not just for the parents, but definitely for the kids involved, to actually, when they're already intellectually impaired, so learning is hard for them, to then have to explain to them that, there's a percentage, and because you're running against all different people, you might come first, but, just because you came first, you might come 7th, or you might come 8th, or you might even come, 9th or 10th. And it's something that is incredibly frustrating for the athletes themselves to learn and understand from an intellectual disability, and definitely from an ASD standpoint as well, that you can put in everything you've got and be exceptionally good at what you do, but there is just no T20 against T20 or a T11 against T11. It's everyone all in together, and it's however the computer spits out that result at the end is how it plays out on the medal podium.
This is our
and
episode.
the tables aren't fair anyway. So it's, they're not perfect. They're not perfect. It's the system that they use, and we're stuck with it. And it's very frustrating. So, because I have a lot of say in triathlon, because it's a new sport and they trust me, like when we're at the 2 times U events, we give a medal to the first II1 athlete, and then a medal to the first II3 athlete, and then a medal to the first II2 athlete, all at the same time. And all it costs the organisers is probably $3.
But it's
a
truly
medal.
inclusive.
And it's truly inclusive, and we all just jump up the podium at the same time. So there are ways that, you can solve this. And I think it would be more inclusive if they stop this multi-class table system, because I actually know some schools that won't do it because of that, because they say it's just too disheartening.
Yeah.
And they won't do it. And they won't. And if you actually look at who competes in school sports Victoria and things, the numbers are still very low, because there's a lot of kids out there with a disability, and it's still very, very low. But I think if there was more opportunities to succeed, they would build it up. But someone has to look at people who are involved in it, not just make rules from behind the table when they don't have a kid with a disability or they've got no idea.
This is our Inclusion Talks podcast. Great pleasure to have Cindy McDougall with me as my co-host. My name's Dan Lonigan, and Liz Gosper, leading administrator when it comes to all ability sport, especially when it comes to her favourite sport in triathletes, in triathlons, I should say. And she's got a lot of athletes with intellectual disabilities heavily involved in this sport. Liz, why triathlons? Why did you get involved in a sport like that? I wouldn't have thought it'd be the easiest sport in the world to get involved in, particularly straight away.
Well, personally, I got involved. I mean, I grew up as a swimmer and, I was running a bit and, always left my bike growing up, I guess. I just started doing them myself and just loved the sport. And it was a new sport. And also we used to have a company we owned and we sponsored triathlons as well. So we're involved in lots of different areas of it. And I love the club atmosphere. I think being in a club is just so fantastic. And if I go back to the athletics club that we have with De Castella, it's just great to be all mixed in together. And the like-minded thing is the running. And so everybody enjoys that. And in triathlon, the clubs I've been in, it's just you're with like-minded people. And, it obviously keeps you, fit and healthy, which is, to me, extremely important. And one of the statistics that Special Olympics has is that people with intellectual impairment are 4 times more likely to be overweight and have mental health issues. And everybody knows, it's a no-brainer that running or, doing sport is good for your weight control. And, you'll want to eat healthily because if you want to do well, you can't eat rubbish food. Correct. And exercise is great for your mental health. And I think, IST has, 90 athletes in it. And, our ones that are really doing a lot of sport and really into this are just exceptional. They're exceptional. Like we've got kids running, just over 3 15-minute kilometres and, across country.
On that one,
really exceptional.
Do you have a particular athlete or athletes who inspire you? And if so, why?
Well, the ones who are very dedicated inspire me, but the ones who have maybe more challenges but just turn up each week. Not everybody in IST competes to be a top athlete. Some just, It was really about friendships first, because having a friend makes you happy. And then having like-minded friends makes you want to come back to that group. And whether it's the knitting group or the sewing group, whatever you like, if you stick to those friends, you've got a connection. And so IST, when the athletes were leaving school, as I said, I wanted them to have something to do after school. And not, it's difficult to get a job with an intellectual impairment, very difficult. Not impossible, but it's much harder than the average person because you're a little bit more limited. I hope that doesn't sound awful, but it's just
it's the truth.
The truth. So if you know that you can connect every week with your friends and the parents are happy because they're doing something healthy, not sitting there with the iPads, they're out of bed early in the morning, we're going to have fun. For example, every second Thursday night we go out for dinner. Every Friday we go out for breakfast. If you're in that group, it's social. That's what's really important about sport, I think. And so the person who inspired me, so when I'm in a run and I'm finding it really hard or a competition, I always think of a couple of the athletes who might have cerebral palsy and an intellectual disability. Or we've got an athlete with an amputee and I think, oh my God, Liz, toughen up. Imagine how hard it is if you had all these extra comorbidity things. They're the ones that inspire me the most, who really try really hard, and athletes that are consistent. And, we do teach good behaviour because I am a teacher, so I'm a bit bossy. And, good behaviour is really important, being nice to everybody. We have a lot of awards and it's not just
great life skills.
Yes. And it's not just for the best kids. It's not all about competition. It's just about being a nice person and a good friend. And they are, they're all so nice to each other. And it gives the parents connection too, because a lot of them don't have their license. So the parents are still driving them, or maybe a carer comes, and the parents build a connection with like-minded parents who might be, experiencing the same types of, issues.
It can be really isolating being the parent of an additional needs child. So it's that's an awesome thing. And I think that's something that a lot of, I guess, our listeners wouldn't realise, is that it's not just about giving the opportunity for the intellectually disabled or for the child with a disability. It is that connection overall, and it is the connections that you can build on the peripheral. There might be a parent that because their child is high needs, that they don't engage with other people because they're embarrassed or they find it hard, or it's a struggle for them to get out the door. And I think that's the great thing about sport and having the opportunities in sport, is that it builds an opportunity for so much more than just competing. It is that friendship, it is that connection, it's the chance to, I guess, go outside that little bubble that can be quite hard when you've got children with additional needs.
Exactly. And like even our dinners that we have, I've had parents say, oh my gosh, we actually, not everybody, but one or two have said to me, we actually didn't take our kids out to dinner because, we didn't know if Johnny was going to have a bit of a meltdown or something was going to happen. But now we feel safe going out with a big group. And none of the parents here are going to judge us if Johnny does have a meltdown or he doesn't want to eat his calamari. Everyone's going to get it and you're going to support me. And it can be quite emotional. Even I remember the first time we did a triathlon, I don't think there was a dry eye. The parents couldn't believe that their kids could actually do a triathlon, because to them, they'd never done one. And they had this idea it was going to be an Ironman, which it wasn't, but they were just blown away and that their child could achieve this.
How long are the distances for the triathlons, particularly if you are a first timer, you've got an intellectual disability, and you say, come along, bring your child along and we'll give them a go. And when they've managed to get through the first one, do you then increase the distance? Do you then increase the, I suppose, difficulty of the event and the course, etc.?
Yeah, so our first one in 2013 was down at Mordialloc Beach, and everybody did the beginners. There's a kids distance, like in mainstream, there's a kids distance, and that's, I think, 7 to 11 years. So we just did that one, but we had a multi-class, we called it division. Multi-class and para are sort of interchangeable terms.
Yeah.
So we all lined up and they did a 150-meter swim, but it was so shallow, if they got scared of swimming, they could actually walk through the water, but they had to go around the boys. And we had carers with them, we had buddies, whatever you wanted to make it. And then you got from the pool, the sea, across the sand, and you had to go to transition one to find your bike. But, that sounds easy, but it's not, because you've got to find the pathway, then you've got to find your bike in a sea of bikes. But we had people in there helping, and they rode on the closed road. I think it was like 3 kilometres up and back. So very achievable. We had tandem bikes, we had 3-wheeler bikes, I think it was a scooter, whatever you needed to make it. And then the run was 500 meters, and you could, you can walk it if you want to. So everybody made it. One parent fell over and hurt her knee, but everybody else was fine. So that was 2013. Now we've built up, I don't advocate for doing longer distances when you're young, because I try to stick to a pathway, and the para pathway is called a sprint distance, 750 swim, 20K ride, 5K run. So that's really where IST leans towards, because I can't cater for Ironman and half Ironman, and it's all different types of training. But if they want to do that, you can go and do some extra training if you want to with another club. And, we do have 1 or 2 that are doing half Ironman, but I'm really about the para pathway, because I'm sitting here waiting for it to be included in World Triathlon. And that's not about Ironman, where we're going. But the Ironman company actually does have inclusion for II if you want to go down there. The Boston Marathon has got an II division now, and you can win $3,000 if you come first in that. So I want the Nike run to include an II category, because it's only mainstream. I really think, and it's just so easy to do. You just pull the results out. You enter it as an II, and then you pull it out, and there's a category. They don't have to do anything different. It's not to make people. It's just trying to give more opportunities, and it doesn't have to be super competitive. It can just be, like I'm saying, the local fun run. Obviously, you can do it, but wouldn't it be? They always have age groups in fun runs. Wouldn't it be nice to have a para category in it?
So, how much training would you like an athlete to do and a parent to do, helping their kids with special needs get involved in a sport like triathlon before they actually compete in an event? Or you're happy if it's for the first time, or comfortable if it's for the first time, that they take on the event in an event, if you know what I mean.
Well, as long as they're capable of, like, they're happy to go in the water, they don't even have to swim, because in the 2x1, they can enter any distance they can do. So you can do the kids distance, which is 7 to 11 years mainstream, but any para athlete can go in that one as well, because we have a separate start time. So it doesn't matter if you're 35, you can go and do that distance. And then you can build up right up to in 2x the Olympic distance. But again, we just think, we're happy with the sprint distance, because that's what IST is about. I just, if I go too broad, then you sort of lose sense of who you are. But anyone can do it. Like, anyone listening who's got a child with autism or a physical disability, or you just turn up, you enter and turn up and do it. Obviously, you need to be able to ride a bike, but if you can't ride a bike, you could ride a three-wheeler. If you can't ride a three-wheeler, you could use a tandem bike with a parent. You can have a buddy going with you, and then you can use your NDIS money to employ a buddy to do it with you, or your parent can do it with you.
That is the one great thing about triathlon, is that I love the word try in it, because it can be adapted to that TRY, and it's about giving people an opportunity to try. And, the three-wheel bikes, I've been pretty blessed with the Warrnambool Running Club. They do a triathlon each year for people with a disability, and it's the three-wheeled bikes, it's the tandem bikes, they can walk in the water. And actually seeing that for the first time, it was incredible, because you realize that it really did give people an opportunity to just get in there and connect and give it a go. So it wasn't about having that base of fitness. It wasn't about, getting and having done a heap of training. It was about, okay, just come and get in there, and we're going to appreciate what you're trying to do, and the commitment that you're putting in to do that. So I think that's probably a brilliant thing that triathlon has, that maybe a lot of the other sports don't offer. So I'd love to see that grow. On your athletes, Liz, what events have you got coming up in the future? What's on the radar for some of your athletes?
Well, it's cross-country running season. So, they're training hard for that through the schools or through our club if they've left school. Some parents are even doing it. So we've got that coming up. And then through the School Sports Victoria, that's all happening now. Most are probably up to regionals. And then we've got states, and then we'll have nationals. We've also got the World Triathlon, as I said, coming up in Townsville. So I think we've got 8 II athletes who'll be involved in that, which is really exciting. I was going to compete as an age grouper, but I broke my foot 8 weeks ago, and that won't be happening now, but I'm still going to be part of it all. I don't think there's any Virtus competition for our athletes until hopefully next year. I think there's Athletics Worlds coming up if some of the athletes want to try for that. And Virtus Athletics isn't like the eyepiece the Paralympics. There's all distances and all field events in that. So whereas I said Paralympics is restricted to 400-meter running, 1,500-meter running, shot put and long jump, Virtus track and field next year will be all events. So that's much.
Dan, for you, that was where Katie won the world championship in the high jump, and that's where, when we had Kate on in the previous episode, she explained about how she loves triple jump, but there is no pathway. So Virtus is what gives her the opportunity, and other kids with a disability that maybe don't fit that Paralympic pathway, it gives them the opportunity to engage in a sport that they either enjoy more, understand more, or are just more capable of being able to succeed at.
And what's speaking out of turn here, ladies, is Athletics Australia rigid in its thinking?
Oh, well, not in all of it, but there certainly are, as we discussed, for example, the medals. That's probably what the parents, if you ask any parent who has kids para, they'd all say that just is not fair and equal, that rule. It's just not. Like it's just ridiculous.
I think AA's come a long way in 10 years. I think they're definitely more willing to listen to outside input, but I do still think there is a long way to go, and there's definitely some structures and I guess selection policies which the Lisa Waitman stuff's brought in, and look, that happens in para as well, and I've got some experience on that front as well. That some of the selection policies leave a lot to be desired, but I do think they are trying to make that better, and that they're definitely getting more people involved in the organisation at a higher level that have an understanding of the actual sport. So instead of just putting people in from a business perspective that they're great at the business, they are looking at the whole picture and trying to engage people who actually understand what it's like to be an athlete or have been an athlete, to help grow that in a better way. And look, I guess we all, hindsight's a great thing, and you only learn about the things that have gone wrong by them going wrong. And I think that they're somewhat rigid because they have to be, with protocols and government funding and what have you. But look, I do think they are slowly getting better.
In my
I
humble,
think, as I mentioned before, if you,
Yeah.
instead of sitting behind a desk when you've had nothing to do with athletes with intellectual disability and their parents and their coaches, then you're not going to understand it. But I think if they got outside and really came and watched these athletes, became really involved in them and tried to understand it, they'd get rid of these funny rules.
I
Give them a clear picture.
agree. Now, Liz, before we let you go, and Liz Gosper is our guest with myself and Cindy McDougall for Inclusion Talks for Aussie Home Loans. Our areas of expertise are purchasing a property, owner-occupied or investment, building a property portfolio, refinancing, debt consolidation, cash out, construction, pre-approvals, first home buyers, equipment loans, car loans and personal loans. And they've got over 25 lenders on their panel. IST, is it where you want it to be, and where would you like it to be, let's say in 5 years' time?
Oh gosh, as I said, I just started off and it's sort of been just developing, when opportunities have come up. I personally want to keep advocating for the athletes and more opportunities. That's something I really like doing. The athletes with intellectual impairment don't speak up for themselves. They probably, well, not many of them do anyway, because of their intellectual impairment. It's very different space to a physical one, and they've got their own complications and own, issues to resolve and move forward. But my specialty is intellectual. We have minority groups like gay rights and things like that. They're very vocal. They work. They have lots of money. Our kids find it very hard to gain employment, get money. They can't read all the articles. So we need to advocate, like Cindy and I need to keep advocating on behalf of them, or teaching the athletes to, stand up for themselves. IST, what I'm doing now is I'm training up some people to maybe take over IST so it doesn't fall in a heap when I leave, because you've got to have a structure there in place when I move on. Luckily, my partner's 14 years younger than me and he's very involved. So, should keep going for quite a while. I'd like to see changes in governance of sport to enable more opportunities for the athletes. We don't have any funding. I'm a business, so I can't get non-for-profit funding. I'm relying on the NDIS to keep going and support these athletes, which has been incredible. You hear bad stories about NDIS, but I've only got good things to say about NDIS. But the cohort of my parents are able to advocate for themselves very well. So I'm in a fortunate sort of socio-economic area with parents who can do a really good job of that. That's probably a little bit unfair, the NDIS, depending on who you are and where you are. But that's been a really good thing for IST. And yeah, just more opportunities, watch the athletes improve and stay in the group to be happy, to have your like-minded friends, to stay fit, be strong, and have, like when the parents move on and these athletes are like 50 years old, they will now have the skills to know how to do a triathlon, go and enter a triathlon, do a fun run. They'll have all these skills that they've built up through IST and their other extra training. So, just happy sporty kids.
For what it's worth, I see you as a hero. I certainly see Cindy as a hero for the work you've done in this area. Do you see yourself as a hero at all this?
No, not a hero. No,
Huh?
I can just see myself as being really lucky to be in the right place at the right time, through the education I had and the opportunities I had growing up and my own children had growing up. I just wanted that for other people. So, and I love what I do. I love triathlons. I mean, it's an easy job for me because I'm not doing something I hate. I'm doing something that I created out of the love of the sport. And, I've met amazing people along the way. I think the kids are the heroes, not me. And
Yeah.
they trust me, which is probably the nicest thing is that
Yeah.
the parents and the athletes have put trust in me. And I find that just, quite overwhelming, really, because I'm not that great. I've just sort of created something that's, hit the mark.
Well, what do you prefer, the run, swim, or the bike leg in the triathlon?
Me personally,
Yeah.
look, honestly, I really like all three. I've probably got a better background in swimming, so I'm not afraid of the swim. Like if it's big and choppy and bring it on, because I like that. I grew up swimming in those conditions, so I like that. I know I'm going to swim well. And I love running. Like I've got a broken foot. The thing I miss at the moment is going for a run because it's so easy and you just put on your runners and you go out the door. You don't have to do anything special to go running. But I do like the bike too. So I can't really say. Love it all.
Well, we love chatting to you. You've got a great story to tell. You're an inspiration. You've done a wonderful job at IST. May it continue for many more years. Good luck with the broken foot mending quickly. And we thank you for joining us today on Inclusion Talks for Aussie Home Loans, who deal with anyone in Australia. They've got clients in every state and capital city. They do Zoom as well. And their areas of expertise include purchasing a property, owner-occupied or investment, building a property portfolio, refinancing, debt consolidation, cash out, everything, construction, pre-approvals, first home buyers, equipment loans, car loans, personal loans, and we've got over 25 lenders on our panel. Thank you to Cindy for organising a great guest. I'll keep putting pressure on you. We've got to try and better Liz next week. Good luck, because she's an absolute beauty. And thanks for joining us on Inclusion Talks. We'll catch you next week.
Thank you
Thanks
both
so
for the
much, Dan.
opportunity.
Thanks so much, Liz.
Thank you.
See you.
That was brilliant. Well done, ladies.
Oh, thanks so much.
That was awesome.
Good. It was
It's
great.
lovely to chat about something that you love, and it's always easy, isn't it?
It is.
Well,
Yeah. Oh, look, I'm just hoping by doing these, we can get the understanding and a bit more awareness out there and get some more kids involved. It's and I think a lot of people don't understand that it's easy. They think it's too hard. And I think
Yeah.
especially at organizational level, they think it's too hard. And, by getting all the stories out there, hopefully we can maybe at least convince one person that it's not and give it a go.
Yeah, I think that a lot of parents are very traumatized by having a kid with a disability, as in they've tried this and that didn't work. They've asked for that and they got a knockback. And it's just a series of knockbacks. But if you can go somewhere where you're not going to be knocked back no matter what you do, and that has to be in a very inclusive space with everything in place, then, it's easier. And, some people move on from IST and might go and join a mainstream club, which is fine by me.
Yep.
I kind of like them for their own good to have the connection still in IST because that's where all their like-minded friends are.
Yep.
It's hard to leave your space, isn't it?
It is.
But, people can do whatever they like.
Hey, on another note, we did mention it a little bit. It's a disgrace, this Lisa Waitman thing. If you've qualified, I mean, I know Jess really well. She's a lovely girl, but and Lisa's lovely too. But if you've qualified with a better time, you get in. I mean, this is what I don't understand AA.
Well, that's what
AA
it's
are so set
Yeah.
in your space, Liz, but then they're willing to sort of change the rules in able-bodied sport like the marathon.
Well, they need to do the US model where they have one race and that's it. And that's the race and that's that. And it's like
agree with
swimming.
that.
That's what swimming's doing now.
Do you want to have a laugh about Oceania's next week?
Mhm.
Yeah, go on.
So Caitlin's event, the long jump. There's
Yeah.
Katie, there's Caitlin, there's Vanessa Lowe, and there's Sarah Walsh. So Vanessa Lowe and Sarah Walsh are Paralympians.
You
Caitlin's
go to
international.
Oceania.
Yep. And all 4 of them have been named as the Australian long jump contingency. Summer Giddings got named in the 100 for the Australian team, but they actually allowed a loophole that they could also enter as an individual for Oceanias. So Summer has entered the long jump. Now, quietly and privately, we call her the medal chaser. She will beat Sarah, she will beat Vanessa, she will beat Kaylin and Caitlin, and she will win gold because she knows in her classification she only has to jump a certain amount and her percentage will be higher than a lot of them. So Athletics Australia will have all 4 of their official Australian team beaten by an official Australian team member not in that event who is just listed as an invite.
Why?
Because they didn't tighten their selection criteria. We got it tightened a few years ago. 84 years ago, got knocked out of Oceanias by Summer because Summer had won nationals. And even though Summer didn't have a Paralympic pathway and Caitlin did, and it was a Paralympic year, she was 25 centimetres off and wanted to try and get it. And they put Summer in instead of Caitlin because the selection criteria was the winner at nationals got the spot. So Caitlin was offered it and then got told she had to turn it down or she'd never be put on another team again because they'd stuffed up the selection criteria and Summer had been brought to their attention that she'd won it, so she was the rightful person to go. She did. Caitlin got knocked out and we got it changed so it was only pathway, but they haven't closed the other loophole that they can enter as an individual and go and do it anyway.
See, if I was media manager of Athletics Australia, and I applied for a couple of jobs there, they've not made any comment over the Lisa Waitman and Jess Stenson fiasco because maybe the CEO is riding roughshod over the media manager. I would say to the CEO, this is an unmitigated disaster. You've got to get out in front of this and you've got to, even if they give you a hard time over it, and there will be members of the media that'll give them a hard time and ask tough questions. You've got to get out in front of it. You've got to answer the questions. You've got to take the criticism. But they don't do that. They hide. They're an organisation, to me, why we haven't had more success in athletics is because I think the head rot's at the top there more than any other organisation I know in this country, in my humble opinion.
Well, up until 2 years ago, the para scoring, nobody even knew how it worked. The new one, nobody really knows how it works because it's meant to be based off the world. But then there's this points that can change and this much that can be added to certain classifications. And yeah, it's their transparency isn't fantastic. Being a little bit.
Cindy, you've been too nice.
Oh, I know it's not. I know their transparency is terrible. Absolutely horrendous.
It's a shit show.
Oh, it's terrible. It's one of the worst run, and it hasn't got any better. It's one of the worst run organisations
Hence why I like seeing
in this country. It's not the worst sporting organisation. Yeah.
I think it's the worst one I deal with.
Yeah. No, I'd probably agree with you, Liz. Well, I appreciate you joining us.
Thanks, Dan. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Liz.
No worries. And Cindy, we'll chat again soon. Look forward to it.
All right.
Half an hour. See you then. Good on you.
Bye.
Bye. Thanks, ladies. See ya. Bye.